Today we're going to be finishing up our course and covering those verbal elements, parts of our verb forms that we haven't covered already. Starting on page 28 in the workbook, and you'll look at chart 14, it will cover this as well. Infinitives. We've been looking at participles, and we saw that participles are a verb that is being used in some fashion and differently than a regular verb. Infinitives are like that as well. In fact, it's very difficult to tell just looking at most translations of participles and infinitives which ones are which. And in fact, you'll be surprised sometimes encountering certain words that where you would think that this is going to be an infinitive, it turns out to be a participle, or the other way around. So don't assume, just because a word is an ing word, an ing word, that it's a participle. Or don't assume even that if you encounter the word to and before a verb form, that it's automatically infinitive. And don't assume that if you encounter a word that appears to be a noun in your text in English, that there's a good chance it might be one of the two, a participle or an infinitive, because both of them can be substantives. Definition of an infinitive, and this definition is, I think I got this from somewhere. It doesn't sound exactly like me. Infinitive is a verbal mode which combines the designative power of a noun with the action aspect of a verb. If that helps you, good. If not, just forget about it. It's just remember that it's just another verbal form. And yes, there are some uses of infinitives that are noun-like, but there's also some uses of the infinitives that are adjective-like or adverb-like. And so, as a definition, this probably needs work. But if you look at the characteristics of an infinitive, you can see why that they talk about it in terms of a verbal noun. As a noun, it's not limited by person and number, but it will have gender. And as a verb, it retains tense and voice. Infinitive is going to be active or passive, and it's going to retain tenses. Okay, if you look at your chart 14, there are 3 tenses for the infinitive: present, aorist, and perfect. So let's take a look at, again, your chart here, and I'll show you just how, if you're going to give a wooden translation of an infinitive, what that would look like. If the ending is ein or ein, if you want to pronounce it that way, that's a present active infinitive ending. You might be able to get away with just translating it to be and then the action of the verb and ing, like to be looking, to be eating, to be fishing, so forth. If it's middle, you might want to try a little more reflexive idea in your translation: to be eating oneself, eat your heart out, to be fishing for oneself, that kind of thing. Present passive infinitive could be translated to be being eaten, to be being beaten, or something like that. Aorist tense forms are simpler in translation, and the endings have that prominent tense sign, where either the sigma or the sigma with the theta. Psi, sestai, and thena. These are the endings for the aorist. And again, your aorist has a simple action connotation, and so you would translate something like to eat, to fish, to look, to hit oneself, something like that. To be hidden, to be hit, to be what's a good verb to use in English for that? To be hated. Okay, there's an example of the aorist passive. The perfect tense forms, you would expect, again, perfect. They're going to show up, the reduplication is going to show up, and the kappa or sigma theta tense signs in the person and number suffix of this perfect infinitive. And then use the word have as a helping verb to give a translation of these perfect tenses. Now, you're going to find lots of exceptions to these rules for translation, though. So you look at each individual verb and how it's traditionally translated to help you with the translation. Let's take a look at the functions of an infinitive. We saw there were lots of functions of the participle. There are fewer functions of the infinitive, but there's still enough, as we'll see. It can serve as adjective, adjectival. It can serve as a noun or some kind of substantive. And it has adverbial function as well. You can find lots of infinitives used with sentences that have a main verb elsewhere. And so the infinitive is serving some kind of adverbial function. And then there are some, again, rare occasions where infinitive is going to be verbal, and it will serve as the verb or complete a verb.
Can you give an example?
I'm going to give several examples. Let's start with adjectival uses. And just follow along. No, don't follow along. But the functions are listed here on page 28. I'm going to give you some examples to show how this works out in real life. When an infinitive is used to modify a noun, and it can be also used to modify another adjective. Here is an example in John 1:12, where the scripture says he gave them the right to become children of God. Well, the translation sounds like an infinitive, but notice what it's doing here. The word exousion is authority or right, and this genesthai is modifying it, explaining what kind of right. So it's serving as an adjective to this noun.